The snickers started the moment Emily Chen walked into Precision Shooting Academy carrying her custom pink rifle case. The morning sun streaming through the glass doors caught the metallic rose gold accents on the case, making it shimmer like jewelry in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the gun range. Every head in the lobby turned, conversations halting mid-sentence as 20-something men in tactical gear and grizzled veterans in worn flannels processed what they were seeing. "Well, would you look at that," chuckled Brad Morrison, a heavyset man with salt and pepper stubble who'd been holding court near the ammunition counter. "Looks like Barbie's here for target practice." The comment drew a chorus of laughter from his usual audience, a rotating cast of weekend warriors who treated the range like their personal clubhouse. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Emily's grip tightened slightly on the case handle, but her expression remained neutral. At 28, she'd learned to mask her reactions to such comments, though they still stung with the same intensity they had during her first visits to shooting ranges 5 years ago. She approached the front desk where Jessica, the young receptionist, offered an apologetic smile. "Morning, Emily. Lane 12 is ready for you," Jessica said, her voice carrying a note of sympathy. She'd witnessed these scenes before and had developed a protective instinct toward the few women who frequented the range. "Thanks, Jess," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the continued murmuring behind her. She signed the waiver and headed toward the range entrance, acutely aware of the eyes following her movement. "Hey, princess," called out Marcus Webb, a lanky man in his 30s who fancied himself a tactical expert despite never having served in any military or law enforcement capacity. "You sure you didn't get lost on the way to the nail salon?" His friends erupted in laughter, one of them pulling out his phone to record what they clearly expected to be an entertaining spectacle. Emily paused at the range door, her hand resting on the push bar. For a moment, she considered turning around and walking out, just as she had on her very first visit to a shooting range 3 years ago. But something in her chest, a familiar warmth that reminded her of her father's encouraging voice, kept her rooted in place. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said quietly, pushing through the door into the range area. The familiar smell of gun oil and burnt powder filled her nostrils, instantly calming her nerves. Here, among the targets and shooting lanes, she could forget about the outside world and focus on what mattered: precision, breath control, and the meditation-like state that came with perfect marksmanship. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But even in her sanctuary, the mockery followed. Brad and his crew had signed up for lanes adjacent to hers, clearly intending to observe and comment on her performance. As Emily set up her equipment with practiced efficiency, she could hear their whispered jokes and staged conversations designed to reach her ears. "I wonder if they make training wheels for rifles," Brad said loudly to Marcus, who responded with exaggerated laughter. "Maybe we should ask the gun store if they have any Hello Kitty scopes." Emily methodically unpacked her rifle case, revealing a custom-built precision rifle that was indeed pink, a soft rose gold color that caught the light beautifully. The weapon itself was a masterpiece of engineering, a Remington 700 action, bedded in a precision stock, topped with a high-end Leupold scope, and finished with a custom Cerakote job that had cost her nearly as much as the rifle itself. Every component had been carefully selected and professionally installed, resulting in a weapon capable of sub-MOA accuracy at distances exceeding 1,000 yards. "Oh my God, it's actually pink," Marcus said, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "This is better than I thought. Someone's definitely recording this, right?" Emily attached her bipod and adjusted the rifle's position on the bench, her movements precise and economical. She'd performed this routine hundreds of times, and muscle memory took over even as her mind processed the continued harassment. Through her peripheral vision, she could see phones being raised, capturing her setup process for what she assumed would be social media ridicule. "I bet she can't even hit the broadside of a barn," Brad continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never witnessed Emily's actual shooting ability. "Probably bought that thing because it matches her purse." The irony wasn't lost on Emily. These men, who spent their weekends playing soldier and arguing about which tactical gear made them look most intimidating, had no idea they were mocking someone who could outshoot them with iron sights while blindfolded. Her pink rifle, which they viewed as a symbol of feminine inadequacy, was actually a tool of extraordinary precision in the hands of someone who'd spent the last 5 years perfecting her craft. Emily's background had prepared her for this moment, though not in ways these men could possibly understand. Growing up as the only daughter of Robert Chen, a former Marine Corps sniper who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan, she'd been introduced to firearms at an early age. But her path to marksmanship hadn't been traditional or easy. Her father had initially been reluctant to teach her to shoot, not out of any belief that women couldn't handle firearms, but because he'd seen too much violence and wanted to protect his daughter from that world. It wasn't until Emily was 15 and had been dealing with bullies at school that he'd finally agreed to take her to the range. If you're going to learn, he told her on that first day, you're going to learn to do it right. Shooting isn't about power or intimidation. It's about discipline, respect, and precision. The weapon doesn't make you strong, your mind does. Those lessons had shaped Emily's approach to marksmanship. While other shooters focused on rapid fire and tactical drills, she developed an almost zen-like approach to precision shooting. She could spend hours working on a single position, adjusting her breathing, reading wind conditions, and calculating ballistics. Her father had taught her that a true marksman could make impossible shots not through luck or brute force, but through absolute mastery of the fundamentals. The pink rifle had been her father's idea, actually. During her second year of serious competitive shooting, she'd been struggling with confidence issues. Despite her technical skill, she often choked under pressure, particularly when shooting in front of crowds or cameras. Her father had noticed her discomfort and made a suggestion that seemed counterintuitive at the time. "You're trying too hard to fit in," he'd observed after watching her struggle through a particularly difficult match. "You're letting other people's expectations affect your performance. What if instead of hiding who you are, you embraced it completely?" The custom pink rifle had been his gift to her on her 25th birthday. "Let them underestimate you," he'd said when she'd first seen it. "Let them think it's just a pretty accessory. When you make the shot that matters, they'll remember the rifle, but they'll know it was the shooter who made the difference." At first, Emily had been mortified by the attention the pink rifle drew. Every range session became a spectacle, every competition an opportunity for jokes and dismissive comments. But gradually, she'd begun to understand her father's wisdom. The rifle had become a filter, weeding out the people whose opinions didn't matter and revealing those who were worth knowing. Now, as she settled into her shooting position at Precision Shooting Academy, Emily felt the familiar calm that came with being behind her rifle. The mockery continued around her, but it felt distant and unimportant. She was in her element, surrounded by the tools and environment that had shaped her into one of the most capable precision shooters in the state. "All right, princess," Brad called out, having moved to the lane directly next to hers. "Let's see what that toy can do. Try not to hurt yourself with the recoil." Emily glanced at the target selection board and chose a standard bullseye target at 100 yards, a distance that most recreational shooters considered respectable. She could have selected the 300-yard targets that would have been more appropriate for her rifle's capabilities, but she'd learned that demonstrations were more effective when they exceeded expectations rather than meeting them. As she loaded her first round, Emily caught sight of herself in the reflection of the glass partition separating the shooting lanes. She looked exactly like what these men expected, a petite Asian woman in her late 20s, wearing fitted jeans and a soft pink sweater that coordinated with her rifle. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup and simple jewelry. Nothing about her appearance suggested the thousands of hours of training, the competition victories, or the precision shooting records she'd set. The first shot came as a surprise to everyone except Emily. She'd gone through her pre-shot routine so naturally that the observers missed the signs of her preparation. The rifle barked once, a sharp crack that echoed through the range, and the target at 100 yards showed a perfect center hit. "Lucky shot," Marcus said immediately, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "Beginner's luck is a real thing." Emily said nothing, simply working the bolt and chambering another round. The second shot followed 10 seconds later, striking within a hair's breadth of the first. The third shot enlarged the hole slightly, and the fourth created what appeared to be a single large hole in the center of the target. The mockery had stopped. Emily was vaguely aware of the silence that had fallen over the adjacent lanes, but she was entirely focused on her shooting. This was her meditation, her escape from the world of judgment and expectation. Each shot was a conversation between her and the target, a test of her ability to control every variable that could affect the bullet's path. She fired her fifth shot, completing a 5-shot group that could have been covered by a quarter. The electronic target system displayed the results, all 5 shots within a 0.75-inch circle at 100 yards. It was the kind of precision that many shooters struggled to achieve with benchrest rifles and unlimited time. "Jesus Christ," Brad whispered, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "How did she do that?" Emily stood up from her shooting position and activated the target retrieval system, bringing her target forward for inspection. The cluster of holes in the center of the bullseye was tight enough that they almost appeared to be a single ragged hole. She'd achieved this level of precision hundreds of times before, but it never failed to satisfy her. That's actually really good, Marcus admitted, his phone still recording but his tone completely changed. I mean, that's competition-level shooting. Emily nodded politely but didn't engage in conversation. She'd learned that explanations rarely changed people's minds, and she wasn't interested in justifying her skill to those who'd mocked her moments before. Instead, she began preparing for her next string of shots, this time at 200 yards. The 200-yard target presented a different challenge. Wind conditions became more significant, and the smaller target required even greater precision. Emily spent several minutes observing the wind flag's position downrange, noting the subtle changes in direction and intensity. She adjusted her scope's turrets to compensate for the increased distance and settled back into her shooting position. The first shot at 200 yards struck the center of the target with authority. Emily worked the bolt smoothly, her muscle memory taking over as she prepared for the second shot. She was dimly aware that a small crowd had gathered behind her, drawn by word of the exceptional shooting taking place in lane 12. "Is that really the same woman who walked in with the pink rifle?" she heard someone whisper. "I heard she just shot a quarter-inch group at 100 yards, another voice replied. Emily blocked out the commentary and focused on her breathing. The second shot followed the first into the center of the target, and the third created a cluster that would have been impressive at 100 yards, let alone 200. She fired 2 more rounds, completing another 5-shot group that measured less than 1.5 inches. The crowd behind her had grown to include several of the range's instructors, including Tom Sullivan, a former Army sniper who taught precision shooting classes. Emily had taken his advanced course the previous year and had impressed him with her natural ability and dedication to improvement. "That's Emily Chen," Tom explained to the gathered observers. "She's one of the best precision shooters I've ever worked with. Won the state championship last year in her division." The revelation hit Brad and Marcus like a physical blow. They'd spent the morning mocking a state champion, recording their ignorance for posterity. Their phones, which had been raised to capture what they'd expected to be embarrassing footage, now contained evidence of their own prejudice and foolishness. "State champion?" Brad repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's a state champion?" Emily heard the comment but didn't react. She'd learned that titles and achievements rarely changed people's fundamental attitudes. They might respect her skill now, but she doubted they'd treat the next woman with a pink rifle any differently. The mockery would continue, just directed at someone else. She packed up her equipment with the same methodical precision she'd shown while shooting. The pink rifle case that had drawn so much attention an hour earlier now seemed to command a different kind of respect. People moved aside to let her pass, and the comments that followed her were admiring rather than dismissive. As Emily approached the front desk to pay for her range time, Jessica smiled broadly. "That was incredible to watch," she said. "I've never seen shooting like that outside of competitions." "Thank you," Emily replied, appreciating the genuine compliment. "It's just practice and patience." Behind her, she could hear Brad and Marcus trying to explain their earlier comments to the crowd, claiming they'd been just joking and that they'd known she was good all along. Their attempts at face-saving fell flat, and Emily felt a small surge of satisfaction knowing that their own recordings would serve as permanent reminders of their hasty judgments. Tom Sullivan approached as she was leaving. "Emily, I wanted to ask you something," he said, his expression unusually serious. "I've got a situation that might interest you. Could we talk privately for a few minutes?" Emily glanced at her watch. She had the rest of the afternoon free, and Tom had always been respectful and professional in their interactions. "Sure, Tom. What's on your mind?" He led her to a small office behind the range's main counter, closing the door behind them. "I've been following your progress since you took my class," he began. "Your shooting ability is exceptional, but more importantly, you handle pressure well. You don't let external factors affect your performance." Emily waited, sensing that this conversation was leading somewhere significant. "I've been contacted by a law enforcement agency," Tom continued. "They're looking for precision shooters to assist with a specialized training program. The pay is excellent, and the work would be meaningful. I think you'd be perfect for it." The offer intrigued Emily, though she was careful not to show too much interest. "What kind of training program?" "Counterterrorism scenarios," Tom replied. "They need shooters who can perform under extreme pressure, in unconventional positions, at varying distances. The kind of shooting that requires absolute precision when failure isn't an option." Emily felt a familiar stirring in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced when her father had first taught her to shoot. This was about more than competition or personal satisfaction. This was about using her skills to make a difference. To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. "I'm interested," she said simply. Tom smiled. "I thought you might be. There's a screening process, both for skill and psychological fitness. If you pass, you'll be part of a very select group of civilian contractors who support law enforcement operations. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? Emily thought about the morning's events, about the mockery and dismissal she'd faced simply for carrying a pink rifle. She thought about her father's lessons about precision and discipline, about the hundreds of hours she'd spent perfecting her craft. Most of all, she thought about the opportunity to prove that true strength came not from intimidation or appearance, but from skill and determination. I'm ready, she said. As Emily left the range that afternoon, she carried with her more than just her pink rifle case. She carried the knowledge that her skills, refined through years of dedication and tested under pressure, might soon be called upon to serve a purpose greater than competition or personal satisfaction. The mockery she'd endured that morning had been just another test, another opportunity to prove that underestimation could be a powerful advantage. The men who had laughed at her pink rifle would probably never understand what they'd witnessed that day. They'd seen exceptional shooting, but they'd missed the deeper lesson about prejudice, assumptions, and the danger of judging others based on appearance. Emily understood that some people would never learn, but she also knew that her actions spoke louder than any words could. As she drove home, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Screening is next week. Are you ready to show them what that pink rifle can really do? Emily smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a 15-year-old girl dealing with bullies to a state champion precision shooter, from facing mockery at ranges to potentially serving her community in ways she'd never imagined. The pink rifle had been more than a gift from her father, it had been a catalyst for discovering her true potential. Her response to Tom was simple: ready. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in November. Emily's phone buzzed insistently on her nightstand, pulling her from deep sleep. The caller ID showed restricted, but she recognized the number from her specialized training program. Emily, this is Commander Sarah Martinez with Metro SWAT. We need you at the federal building downtown. Active hostage situation. How quickly? Can you get here? Emily was already reaching for her clothes. 20 minutes, Commander. Do I need to bring my gear? Negative. Everything's been prepared. Just get here fast. The drive through empty city streets gave Emily time to center herself, drawing on the mental preparation techniques she'd learned during her intensive 3-month training with the Metro Police Department's Specialized Response Unit. The screening process Tom had mentioned had been rigorous: psychological evaluations, stress tests, and shooting assessments that pushed her skills to their absolute limits. She'd been one of only 3 civilians selected for the program, and the only woman. The other candidates had been former military snipers with combat experience, making Emily's selection both an honor and a burden. She'd proven herself repeatedly during training, but this would be her first real deployment. The federal building was surrounded by emergency vehicles when Emily arrived. Police cars, SWAT trucks, ambulances, and fire engines created a perimeter of flashing lights that illuminated the early morning darkness. She showed her credentials to the checkpoint officers and was directed to the command post, a converted RV bristling with communication equipment. Commander Martinez met her at the door. A compact woman in her 40s with graying hair and intense brown eyes. She'd been initially skeptical of Emily's inclusion in the program. That skepticism had evolved into grudging respect as Emily had consistently outperformed expectations during training scenarios. Situation report. Martinez began without preamble. At 2:15 a.m., 3 armed suspects entered the building through a service entrance. They've taken 12 hostages on the 7th floor, night shift workers from the accounting department. Initial demands are for $2 million in cryptocurrency and safe passage out of the country. Emily nodded, her mind already processing the tactical implications. What's the layout like? That's our problem, Martinez continued, leading Emily to a table covered with building blueprints. The 7th floor is mostly open office space, but the hostages are being held in a conference room here. She pointed to a room in the building's center. 3 windows, but they're all facing the courtyard. No clear line of sight from any of our established positions. What about the building across the street? Emily asked, studying the blueprints. 40-story office complex. We've been setting up there, but the angle is all wrong. The conference room windows are visible, but barely. Any shot would have to thread through about a 6-inch gap between the window frame and the interior wall. Emily felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of scenario she'd trained for, the impossible shot that required perfect precision under ultimate pressure. What's the distance? 340 yards. Slight upward angle. Wind conditions are variable due to the urban canyon effect. Martinez paused, studying Emily's expression. I need to be clear about something. Negotiations have stalled. The suspects are becoming increasingly agitated. We have intelligence suggesting they're planning to start Executing hostages at dawn. That gives us about 90 minutes. The weight of the situation settled on Emily's shoulders. 12 innocent people's lives potentially depended on her ability to make an impossible shot with her pink rifle, the same weapon that had drawn mockery just months ago. I'll need to see the position, Emily said. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor of the office building felt endless. Emily used the time to visualize the shot, running through her mental checklist of variables: distance, wind, angle, target size, background considerations. Each element had to be perfect. The shooting position had been prepared by the SWAT team's tactical unit. Sandbags, spotting scopes, and communication equipment were arranged near a large window that had been partially opened. Emily could see the federal building across the street, its 7th floor lit by the harsh fluorescent lights that had been left on when the building was evacuated. Detective Mike Rodriguez, the team's primary sniper, greeted her with a mixture of relief and concern. "I've been trying to get a clear shot for the past hour," he said, gesturing toward the target building. "The angle is just too tight. I can see into the conference room, but I can't get a clean line on any of the suspects without risking the hostages." Emily set up her pink rifle on the prepared position, adjusting the bipod and checking the scope settings. Through the high-powered optic, she could see into the conference room where the hostages were being held. 12 people sat zip-tied to chairs, their fear visible even at this distance. 3 armed men paced around the room, their movements agitated and unpredictable. "Which one is the primary target?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "The one in the red jacket," Rodriguez replied, pointing to a man who appeared to be giving orders to the others. "He's been identified as Marcus Webb." "Yeah, the same guy from the shooting range who mocked your rifle. Turns out he's been planning this for months after losing his job with the federal government." Emily felt a chill of recognition. The same man who had called her princess and suggested she belonged in a nail salon was now holding innocent people at gunpoint. The irony was bitter and sharp. "Intelligence suggests he's the most unstable of the 3, Martinez's voice crackled through Emily's earpiece. "If we can take him out, the others might surrender." Emily studied the target through her scope. Webb was visible intermittently as he moved around the room, but only for seconds at a time. The shot would have to be taken through the narrow gap Rodriguez had mentioned, a space barely wider than the bullet itself. "I can make the shot," Emily said quietly. "But I need him to stop moving for at least 3 seconds. Negotiator is trying to engage him in conversation," Martinez replied. "We'll give you a signal when to take the shot." Emily settled into her position, feeling the familiar calm that came with being behind her rifle. The pink stock felt warm against her cheek, and she could hear her father's voice in her mind. "Precision isn't about the weapon, Emily. It's about the shooter's mind." Through her scope, she could see Webb becoming increasingly agitated. He was shouting at the hostages, waving his weapon erratically. One of the other suspects was trying to calm him down, but Webb seemed to be spiraling toward violence. "Target is becoming increasingly unstable," Rodriguez reported. "We may not have much time." Emily adjusted her scope's focus, fine-tuning her sight picture. The gap she had to shoot through was even narrower than described, perhaps 4 inches of clear space between the window frame and an interior wall. At 340 yards, that margin of error was almost non-existent. Wind conditions were her biggest concern. The urban canyon created unpredictable air currents that could push her bullet off course by inches. She observed the movement of flags and debris in the street below, calculating the wind's effect on her projectile's path. "Emily, we're getting reports that Webb is preparing to shoot a hostage." Martinez's voice was tense. "You need to be ready." Through her scope, Emily could see Webb grabbing one of the hostages, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25. He was dragging her toward the window, apparently planning to make an example of her to force compliance with his demands. "I have the shot," Emily said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "But I need him to stop moving." "Negotiator is engaging now," Martinez replied. "Stand by." Emily could hear the negotiator's voice through the building's communication system, trying to talk Webb down. For a moment, it seemed to work. Webb stopped dragging the hostage and turned toward the phone, his weapon still pointed at the young woman's head. "Take the shot," Martinez commanded. Emily's world narrowed to the small circle of her scope's view. She could see Webb's profile through the impossibly narrow gap, his finger on the trigger of his weapon. The young woman was crying, her face a mask of terror. Emily controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to the rhythm she'd practiced thousands of times. The rifle was an extension of her body, the crosshairs steady on their target. Despite the 340-yard distance and difficult angle, the shot had to be perfect. There would be no second chance. Emily squeezed the trigger with the same precise pressure she'd used on countless targets at the range. The pink rifle bucked against her shoulder, the familiar recoil barely registering in her consciousness. The bullet traveled its path in less than half a second, threading through the narrow gap with millimeter precision. Webb dropped instantly, the bullet striking him in the upper chest and spinning him away from the hostage. His weapon clattered to the floor as he collapsed, and the young woman stumbled away from his falling body. "Target down," Rodriguez shouted, his voice filled with amazement. "Clean hit. The hostage is safe." The remaining 2 suspects, shocked by the sudden loss of their leader, dropped their weapons and surrendered as SWAT teams breached the building. Within minutes, all 12 hostages were being evacuated, their nightmare finally over. Emily remained in position, her rifle still trained on the conference room, until she received the all-clear signal. Only then did she allow herself to process what had just happened. She had made an impossible shot through a gap barely wider than her bullet, at a distance where most shooters would struggle to hit a barn door. "Emily, that was incredible," Martinez said, arriving at her position with an expression of awe. "I've never seen anything like that shot. The angle, the distance, the precision required, it shouldn't have been possible." Emily began breaking down her rifle, her hands steady despite the adrenaline that was finally beginning to subside. "It was just training and preparation," she said quietly. "The rifle did what it was designed to do." Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. "I've been a sniper for 15 years, and I couldn't have made that shot. The gap was so narrow, the angle so extreme, how did you even see the target clearly?" "Sometimes the impossible shot is the only shot that matters," Emily replied, echoing something her father had once told her. "You don't think about the difficulty. You just focus on the fundamentals and trust your training." As they prepared to leave the building, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the mockery at the shooting range to saving 12 lives with a single, perfectly placed shot. The pink rifle that had drawn so much ridicule had proven to be the tool that made the difference when it mattered most. News crews were already gathering outside the federal building as Emily emerged with the tactical team. She tried to avoid the cameras, but her pink rifle case was unmistakable. Within hours, the story would spread across social media and news outlets. "Woman with pink rifle saves hostages with impossible shot." Tom Sullivan was waiting for her at the command post, his face beaming with pride. "I knew you were special," he said, "but what you did tonight was beyond special. You saved 12 lives with 1 shot." Emily accepted the praise graciously, but her mind was already moving beyond the moment. She thought about the young woman who had been seconds away from execution, about the other hostages who could now go home to their families. That was what mattered, not the acclaim or attention, but the lives that had been saved. The pink rifle was carefully secured in its case, ready for the next time it might be needed. Emily knew that there would be other calls, other impossible shots, other opportunities to prove that precision and preparation could triumph over prejudice and underestimation. As she drove home through the dawnlit streets, Emily's phone buzzed with messages from friends and family who had seen the news reports. But the message that meant the most was from her father, sent from his deployment overseas. "Proud of you, sweetheart. You made the shot that mattered." Emily smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The mockery she'd endured at the range had been just the beginning of a story that culminated in saving innocent lives. The pink rifle that had drawn so much ridicule had proven to be perfectly suited for the most important shot of her career. Sometimes the most powerful statements are made not with words, but with precision, courage, and the willingness to prove that appearances can be deceiving. Emily Chen had done more than make an impossible shot. She had demonstrated that true strength comes not from intimidation or conformity, but from skill, determination, and the courage to be exactly who you are. The pink rifle would continue to turn heads and draw comments, but now those comments would be filled with respect rather than mockery. And somewhere in the city, 12 people would go to sleep knowing that their lives had been saved by a woman who refused to let other people's expectations define her capabilities. The impossible shot had been made, the hostages were safe, and Emily Chen had proven that sometimes the most unlikely heroes carry the most distinctive weapons. The pink rifle had found its purpose, and Emily had found hers. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.